Welcome to Storytime with Pops, where every quiet story carries a hidden truth. Here, we uncover the pain of betrayal, the cost of greed, and the moment justice finally comes home. So sit back, listen close, and let Pops tell you a story you won't forget. At my wife's funeral, my daughter stood beside her coffin and asked for donations. Everyone thought she was grieving. I knew she was performing. But before she died, my wife left one final witness in the kitchen. The first lie my daughter told was at her mother's funeral. She stood beside the casket in a black dress she had bought with my credit card, one hand pressed to her chest, the other wrapped around her husband's arm like she was too broken to stand. Her voice trembled perfectly when she thanked everyone for coming. She even dabbed her eyes at the right moments, though I noticed the tissue never got wet. "My mom gave everything to this family," Marcy said, "and Dad is too proud to ask for help." People looked at me then, neighbors from our street, men from the machine shop, women from Linda's quilting club. They gave me that soft funeral smile, the one that says they are already deciding what kind of burden you are going to become. Marcy continued, "So Daniel and I set up a memorial fund to protect Dad from losing the house." I nearly turned in my pew. The house was not in danger. Linda and I had paid it off 6 years earlier by skipping vacations, driving old cars, and fixing every leak ourselves. The workshop behind it had been my father's before it became mine, and I had spent half my life turning cedar and walnut into tables people fought over at estate sales. I leaned toward Marcy and whispered, "What fund?" She didn't look at me. Her smile stayed fixed on the crowd. "It's what Mom would have wanted." That sentence landed like a slap because my wife had hated that phrase. She used to say it was how selfish people dressed greed in someone else's clothes. After the service, people came by with envelopes. Some handed them to me. Most handed them to Daniel because he stood near the exit with a little wooden box and a laminated sign that read LINDA Heart Memorial Care Fund. He had printed her smiling face on it, the photo from our 40th anniversary, the one where she was laughing because I had spilled champagne on my tie. I watched a widow from church fold a $20 bill and push it through the slot. I watched my former apprentice give Daniel a check. I watched my brother's daughter donate the money she had been saving for a used laptop. When I tried to take the box, Daniel's grip tightened. "You're overwhelmed, Pops," he said. He called me Pops in public because he thought it made him sound warm. In private, when he wanted me small, he called me old man. Marcy touched my sleeve. "Dad, don't make a scene." My wife lay 10 feet away in a rented casket, and my daughter was afraid I would embarrass her fundraising. That night I went home alone. The house smelled like lilies, old coffee, and the absence of the woman who had made every room honest. On the kitchen counter sat 3 casseroles, 2 sympathy cards, and a folder I had never seen before. Across the tab, in Daniel's blocky handwriting, were the words, "Transition Plan." Inside were brochures for assisted living facilities, a power of attorney form with my name misspelled, and a handwritten list of repairs the house supposedly needed before liquidation. Liquidation. They had used that word about the kitchen where Linda had taught Marcy to frost birthday cakes. About the hallway where we marked our daughter's height in pencil until she got too tall to stand still. At the bottom of the folder was a note. "Dad is confused. Do not let him sign anything without us." I sat at the table until the refrigerator hummed itself into the quiet. Then I looked up at the corner above the pantry. Linda had installed that little camera after someone stole tomatoes from her garden 2 summers before. She never turned anything off. She trusted people, but she trusted evidence more. I thought about Marcy's dry tissue, Daniel's wooden donation box, the word liquidation. Then I whispered to the empty kitchen, "What did you see, Linda?" The next morning, Marcy arrived with coffee she didn't drink and a smile she didn't mean. Daniel came behind her carrying the wooden donation box under one arm. He set it on my table as if he owned both the box and the table. His watch flashed beneath the kitchen light, gold and too large, a gift he had once claimed came from a client. Linda had whispered to me later, "What client pays a debt collector with jewelry?" Marcy kissed my cheek. How are you feeling today, Dad? Like my wife is dead, and my daughter is running a charity in my name. Her face tightened. Daniel laughed softly, the way men laugh when they want to turn a knife into a joke. Pops, people wanted to help. We just organized it. How much did they give? Daniel opened his hands. We haven't counted. That's not important right now. It became important when my name went on the box. Marcy sat across from me. Dad, you're grieving. You don't understand the costs coming. What costs? The house needs work, the taxes, your medications, Mom's final expenses. Linda had insurance. The funeral is paid for. The taxes are paid until November. My medications cost $11 a month. Daniel leaned over the table. This is exactly why we need to help. You think because you remember a few numbers, you're fine, but you left the stove on last month. I boiled tea. You almost burned the house down. I stared at him. You weren't here. Marcy blinked. Daniel recovered fast. Marcy told me. I didn't, she said before she could stop herself. The silence after that was small but sharp. Daniel's smile returned with less warmth. Maybe Linda mentioned it. Linda was in the hospital last month, I said. For the first time that morning, he looked away. That was when I knew this wasn't grief making people sloppy. It was strategy moving too quickly. Marcy slid a paper toward me. We talked to Greenhaven residents. They have a room opening next week, just temporarily while Daniel handles the house. The brochure showed a white-haired couple walking beside a pond, smiling like people in commercials who had forgotten how knees work. Under the brochure was a contract with yellow tabs where I was supposed to sign. I pushed it back. No. Dad. No. Daniel sighed. You want the ugly truth? Fine, you can't live alone. The neighbors are worried. People at the funeral were worried. You're 71, your wife handled the bills, and the workshop is dangerous. My wife handled the garden club, and your excuses. I handled the bills. He tapped the contract. We're not asking. My daughter flinched, but she didn't defend me. That hurt worse than Daniel's threat. I stood slowly. The house tilted for a second, not from age, but from the kind of rage that has nowhere respectful to go. Get out. Marcy's eyes filled. This time the tears were real, but they weren't for me. They were tears of frustration, of a spoiled child denied the ending she had rehearsed. Daniel picked up the donation box. You'll thank us later. After they left, I went to the pantry and climbed the little step stool Linda used for the top shelf. My hands shook as I pulled down the camera hub. A green light still blinked on the side. The system was cheap, bought from a warehouse store, but Linda had insisted on cloud backup because she didn't trust local storage after our basement flooded. I found the password taped under the flour container in her handwriting. Tomato Thief 2024. Even grieving, I laughed once. Then I logged in. The camera feed opened on my laptop, showing my kitchen from the past 24 hours, then the week, then the month. I clicked backward through dinners, nurses, Marcy's visits, Linda's empty chair. 3 nights before the funeral, at 11:43 p.m. The camera had recorded Daniel entering my kitchen alone. He was carrying the donation box, and he was talking to someone on the phone. I turned up the volume. At first, all I heard was Daniel breathing through his nose. The camera had been made to catch garden thieves, not whispered crimes, so the audio hissed under the refrigerator's hum. I dragged the volume slider higher. Daniel crossed the kitchen, opened the drawer where Linda kept the good scissors, and cut the bottom felt from the donation box. Then he said, "No, she won't question it. She thinks grief makes her noble." My daughter's voice came through the speaker, thin but clear enough. "Don't talk about her like that. Then stop defending a dead woman." I stopped breathing. Daniel paced in front of the sink. He had no right to stand there. That was where Linda used to peel apples into one long ribbon just to impress children. "We need cash before probate," he said. "Your father won't sell if he thinks the shop is still his." Marcy murmured something I couldn't hear. Daniel answered, "Because the contractor wants a deposit. The buyer is ready. He likes the land, not the house, the land. He'll tear it down." My fingers dug into the laptop edge. Tear it down. The workshop, the maple tree, Linda's roses, the height marks in the hallway, all of it reduced to dirt and money. Marcy said, louder now, Mom said Dad gets to stay as long as he wants. Your mom is dead, your dad is weak, and you are tired of pretending you don't want your share. There it was, not grief, not concern, a share. Daniel took an envelope from his jacket and placed it in the donation box through the hidden bottom he had cut open. Then he removed another envelope from inside. He was testing the trick, making sure donations could disappear without breaking the seal on top. He'll look guilty if the money goes missing, Daniel said. Old man grieving, confused, maybe he misplaced it. Maybe he gave it to some scam caller. People will believe anything about old people if you say it with a sad face. Marcy was quiet. Say it, Daniel demanded. I don't want him in the way. My daughter said it like someone stepping over a line and pretending the floor had moved. I backed away from the laptop as if the screen had become something diseased. For 20 minutes, I watched Daniel count imaginary donations, practice a concerned expression in the microwave reflection, and describe my future like he had already filed it. Greenhaven first, then a medical evaluation, then a sale, then he and Marcy would manage the money because I was declining. I replayed the video 3 times. On the 4th, I heard something that changed the shape of the story. At the end of the call, Daniel said, and if your father brings up the red ledger, deny it exists. The red ledger. I hadn't heard that phrase in years. Linda kept old household notebooks by color, blue for bills, green for garden, yellow for recipes, red for things she did not want lost. She had started it after Marcy married Daniel, when money began vanishing from small places. A missing checkbook, a credit card charge Linda didn't remember, a loan Marcy swore was temporary. I searched the desk, nothing. I searched Linda's sewing room, nothing. I searched beneath the mattress like an old fool in a bad mystery, nothing. Then I remembered how Linda hid Christmas gifts from Marcy when she was little. Not in drawers, not closets. She hid them in plain sight, somewhere too ordinary to suspect. I went to the workshop. The air inside held sawdust, oil, and cold. My tools waited in their places like old friends who had heard the whole thing and kept quiet until I arrived. Above the bench, Linda had hung a framed print that said measure twice, cut once. Behind it was a shallow wall safe. I had forgotten we owned it. My thumbprint still opened it. Inside lay the red ledger, a flash drive taped to the cover, and a note in Linda's hand. Arthur, if they come for you before I can stop them, don't argue. Let them perform. Then play the truth. I did not open the ledger right away. I held it against my chest like it was warm, like some part of Linda had been folded between those red covers and left waiting for my hands. In the workshop, the rain began ticking against the tin awning outside. Every sound seemed too loud after reading her note. Arthur, if they come for you before I can stop them, don't argue. Let them perform. Then play the truth. My wife had known. That thought was both comfort and cruelty. Comfort because I had not imagined the rot. Cruelty because she had carried it while cancer took pieces of her day by day, smiling across hospital trays, letting Marcy adjust her pillows, letting Daniel kiss her forehead like a son. I opened the ledger on my workbench. The first pages were dates, amounts, names. Daniel's company, Marcy's account. Checks written to home repair companies that did not exist. A loan against Marcy's SUV that Linda had secretly paid to keep it from being repossessed. My signature on documents I had never seen, copied badly enough that even anger could recognize the shape of fraud. Halfway through the book, Linda's handwriting changed. It became less like record-keeping and more like testimony. March 3, Daniel asked again about selling the back lot. Told him Arthur would never sell while alive. He smiled too long. March 17, Marcy cried about debt. Said Daniel says house should belong to her because she sacrificed by staying near us. She visits twice a month. April 2, Daniel pushed for power of attorney. Said Arthur won't know the difference soon. Arthur was in the next room sharpening chisels. April 19, I installed backup camera in workshop after hearing voices near the office at night. I froze. The kitchen camera was not the only one. I plugged in the flash drive. A folder opened with 6 videos, 3 audio files, and 1 document named For Arthur First. I clicked the document. Linda had written me a letter. She apologized for hiding the investigation. She said she wanted to protect me from the humiliation of seeing our daughter choose greed over us. She said she had planned to confront Marcy after one final treatment cycle when she had strength enough to stay upright through the shouting. Then came the line that made my vision blur. If I don't get the chance, make them tell the truth in front of the people they lied to. Not punish, not destroy, tell the truth. That was my Linda. She believed truth was a door. I had lived long enough to know some people only saw doors as things to lock behind them. The first video showed Daniel in my workshop at midnight. He was photographing drawers, measuring walls, opening cabinets. He moved like a burglar with a key, confident but cautious. In the corner of the frame, Marcy stood with her arms wrapped around herself. After Greenhaven, we list it as distressed, Daniel said. The old man won't last 2 winters in there. Marcy whispered, "Don't say that." What? It's math. I closed the laptop and walked outside into the rain. For a while I stood by Linda's roses, letting water run down my face so I wouldn't have to know what was rain and what wasn't. The house behind me glowed with one kitchen light. The workshop waited dark. Somewhere across town, my daughter was likely telling friends I was confused, unstable, ungrateful. The next morning I called the bank, then our lawyer, then Greenhaven. I did not accuse anyone. I did not shout. I asked for copies. I asked for dates. I asked for names. By noon, I had learned Daniel had scheduled my admission consultation without my consent. By 3, I learned a realtor had already walked through my back lot. By 5, I learned the memorial fund was not a fund at all. It was a personal account Daniel had opened 2 days before Linda died. That evening, Marcy called. "Dad," she said, voice soft, "we need to talk about your behavior." I looked at Linda's red ledger on the table. "Yes," I said, "we do." Greenhaven smelled like lemon polish and surrender. I went there alone the next morning, wearing the gray jacket Linda said made me look like a retired judge. The receptionist smiled until I gave my name. Then her face did a small, guilty thing. "Mr. Hart," she said, "we expected you with your daughter." "I expected my wife to outlive me," I said. "We're all adjusting." She didn't know whether to laugh, so she didn't. A woman named Carla invited me into an office with fake plants and real pity. She had a folder ready. My name was printed on the tab, Arthur Hart Transition Case. Inside were notes from Daniel, medical claims I had never heard, and a paragraph describing me as resistant, forgetful, emotionally volatile, and possibly unsafe around tools. That last one nearly made me smile. I had built half the town's dining tables, and now a man who couldn't hang a shelf without 3 YouTube tutorials had called me dangerous around wood. "Who gave you this information?" I asked. Carla folded her hands. "Your son-in-law contacted us with your daughter's support." "Did you speak to my doctor?" "No, not yet." "Did you speak to me?" "Not directly." "Then why is there a room reserved?" Her smile faded. I slid a copy of the kitchen camera transcript across her desk. Not the video, not yet, just enough. Carla read the first page, then the second. When she reached the line about people believing anything about old people, she covered her mouth. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "Don't be sorry, be careful." She nodded slowly. "I can cancel the consultation and flag the file. I can also provide you copies of all communications." "Please do." As she printed emails, I watched the hallway through her glass wall. An elderly man in slippers shuffled past holding a puzzle book. A nurse touched his shoulder gently, and he smiled as if kindness had become a surprise. I thought of Daniel placing me here like a box he no longer needed. I thought of Marcy letting him. Carla handed me a stack of papers. One email from Daniel stood out. "Arthur is proud and manipulative. He may claim we are after money. This is part of his decline." I read it twice. Not because it hurt, though it did, because it was clever. Daniel had built a trap where any protest became proof. If I defended myself, I was manipulative. If I refused help, I was proud. If I accused them, I was paranoid. He hadn't just stolen the truth. He had stolen the language I would need to get it back. On the drive home, I stopped at the cemetery. Linda's grave still looked temporary, the soil too raw, the flowers too fresh. I sat on the folding chair someone had left and read her the email out loud. When I finished, the wind moved through the cemetery maples. "I know," I said. "You told me to let them perform." My phone rang before I reached the truck. It was Marcy. "Where are you?" she demanded. "Out." "Greenhaven called me. They said you canceled the appointment." "I did." "Dad, you embarrassed us." "There it is." "What?" "The crime in this family, not theft, not lies, embarrassment." She went quiet. I softened because she was still my daughter, because memory is a cruel thing. I could still see her at 6 years old, running through the sprinkler in a swimsuit with yellow ducks on it. I could still hear Linda laughing when Marcy lost her first tooth in a peanut butter sandwich. "Marcy," I said, "come over tonight without Daniel." "I can't." "You mean he won't let you?" "Don't start." "Then bring him." Her voice lowered. "Dad, please don't make this harder. You helped put my name on a care home file. I was trying to protect you." "No, you were trying to protect a plan." The call ended. That night my porch light flickered at 8:12. Daniel arrived first, stepping out of his SUV like a man coming to collect rent. Marcy followed, pale and smaller than she had looked at the funeral. Daniel held a manila envelope. I opened the door before he could knock. He smiled. "Pops, let's settle this like family." Behind me, in the corner of the kitchen, Linda's camera blinked green. Daniel laid the envelope on my kitchen table with ceremony. Some men bring flowers when they want forgiveness. Daniel brought paper. "We've spoken to an attorney," he said. "You found one that works nights." Marcy winced. Daniel ignored it. He removed 3 documents and lined them up as if he were dealing cards. The first was a proposed guardianship petition. The second was a letter from a doctor I had never met, recommending cognitive evaluation based on family concern. The third was a property management agreement giving Daniel temporary authority over repairs, contractors, and sale negotiations. He tapped the 3rd page. "This is the practical one." I looked at Marcy. "Did you read these?" Her eyes moved to Daniel. "She understands them," he said. "I asked my daughter." Marcy's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "Dad, we don't want to fight." "Then stop bringing weapons to dinner." Daniel laughed once. "You're proving our point. Hostile, paranoid, dramatic." I let him talk. That was the hardest part. Every word he said begged for interruption. Every lie came dressed in concern. He said Linda had worried about my memory. He said neighbors had called Marcy. He said my workshop insurance might be void if I used machinery unsupervised. He said the house stairs were unsafe. He said grief made old men stubborn. I watched Marcy watch the table. When he finished, I said, "What happens to the memorial money?" Daniel blinked. "What?" "The money people donated in Linda's name. It's being held." "Where?" "In an account." "Whose account?" He leaned back. "This obsession with money is unhealthy." There it was again, turn the question into a symptom. I reached beside my chair and placed a recorder on the table. Not the kitchen camera, something obvious, something Daniel could see. His eyes narrowed. "Are you recording us?" "Yes." "That's illegal." "In this state, one-party consent is enough." I checked. Marcy whispered, "Dad, you stood at your mother's funeral and collected money under my name. I am asking where it went." Daniel stood. "We're done." "No," I said, "you're performing." That word hit Marcy. She looked up sharply. I slid one photocopied page from Linda's red ledger across the table. Just one. The page where Linda had written about Daniel pushing for power of attorney. Daniel's face went blank. Marcy reached for it, but he snatched it first. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "In my house." Linda was sick. She wrote things down wrong. My wife knew the difference between a fever dream and your handwriting. He stepped toward me. For the first time, I saw the man under the husband costume. Cold, cornered, angry that an old man had failed to be easy. "Listen to me," he said. "You keep this up and you will lose everything. Courts don't like unstable widowers harassing their children." Marcy stood too. "Daniel, stop." He turned on her. "You wanted this handled, so let me handle it." That sentence did more than my accusations ever could. It showed her the leash around her own neck. I felt no triumph, only exhaustion. Daniel shoved the papers back into the envelope. "We're filing tomorrow." "Good," I said. "File." His smile returned, thin as a razor. "You have no idea what I can prove." I looked at the green light above the pantry. "Neither do you." After they left, I saved the kitchen video to 3 drives. I emailed one to myself, one to my lawyer, and one to Linda's sister Ruth, who had once taught high school debate and had the moral flexibility of a guillotine. Then I poured 2 cups of tea out of habit, one for me, one for the chair across the table. The second cup went cold. Near midnight, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Mr. Hart, this is Emily from Greenhaven. I found something you should know. Your son-in-law offered a donation if we expedited your placement." Attached was a screenshot. Daniel had tried to buy my cage. Linda's sister Ruth arrived the next afternoon in a red coat and a mood that could strip paint. She was 74, 5 feet tall, and had spent 41 years teaching teenagers to defend arguments they barely understood. Retirement had not softened her. It had only removed witnesses. She walked into my kitchen, kissed my cheek, and said, "Show me what the reptiles did." I gave her tea and the red ledger. She read for 27 minutes without speaking. I know because I watched the clock the way a man watches a fuse burn. When she finished, she removed her glasses and placed them on the table. "Linda should have told me. She didn't want to worry you. She always confused secrecy with protection." Ruth looked toward the empty chair. "Stubborn woman." "Best woman." "Yes. That too." I showed her the kitchen video, then the workshop video, then the Greenhaven emails. By the time Daniel's voice said, "People will believe anything about old people," Ruth's hands were folded so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Do not go to them again alone," she said. "I'm not helpless." "No, you're grieving. Grief makes honorable people underestimate dishonorable ones." That was Ruth's gift. She could insult you and be right. She asked for a list of everyone who donated at the funeral. I didn't have one, but Linda's church did. Ruth called the pastor and used a voice that made forgiveness sound optional. Within an hour, we had names, amounts, and several people willing to confirm they thought the money was for my care and Linda's final expenses. Then Ruth asked about the house. I told her Daniel had contacted a realtor. She asked the realtor's name. When I gave it, she smiled. "Oh," she said, "him. You know him. I taught his ex-wife. Was she a good student?" "No, but she learned eventually." Ruth called the realtor on speaker. She introduced herself with the sweet tone she reserved for traps and church luncheons. She asked whether he had recently viewed my property. He hesitated. Ruth allowed the silence to grow teeth. Finally, he admitted Daniel had presented himself as acting on behalf of the family and claimed I was entering assisted living permanently. "Did Mr. Hart sign anything?" Ruth asked. "No." "Did you verify authority?" "I was told." "That was not my question." The man began apologizing before he knew what for. Ruth wrote notes in Linda's ledger margins with a pencil, not over Linda's words, never over them, around them, building a second wall of evidence. At 4, Marcy called me again. I let it ring. Ruth answered on the 5th. "Marcy, darling," she said, "this is your Aunt Ruth. Before you say another word to your father, ask yourself whether you want it played for a judge." I could hear Marcy crying through the phone. "Aunt Ruth, I didn't know everything." Ruth's eyes found mine. "Then come here and learn," she said. Daniel shouted in the background, "Hang up." Ruth smiled. "Hello, Daniel. I was hoping you'd be audible." The line went dead. For the first time since Linda's funeral, I laughed hard enough to hurt. Ruth did not laugh. She looked at me with something gentler. Arthur, there is a question you need to answer before this becomes public. What question? Do you want to save Marcy or expose her? I hated the answer because I didn't have one. The daughter I loved and the woman on those recordings were not separate people. They were one person seen in different light. I wanted to drag her back from Daniel. I wanted her to confess. I wanted her to feel what she had done. I wanted none of it to have happened. Ruth touched Linda's ledger. Truth doesn't guarantee reconciliation. I know. No, you don't, not yet. That evening, Marcy came alone. She looked smaller at the door, face bare of makeup, eyes swollen. For one irrational second, I saw my little girl after nightmares, clutching her blanket, asking if monsters were real. Then I remembered she had stood beside her mother's coffin and sold me as a problem to be solved. I opened the door. Daniel doesn't know I'm here, she said. From the kitchen, Ruth called. Then for once, he is not the smartest person in the room. Marcy sat at the kitchen table like a defendant pretending she was still family. Ruth took notes. I made tea because I did not know what else fathers do when their children come home broken and guilty. Linda would have known. Linda always understood the space between comfort and consequence. Marcy wrapped both hands around the mug. Daniel said we were drowning. Financially, Ruth asked. Marcy nodded. How much? I don't know. Ruth's pencil stopped. You don't know how much debt justified putting your father in a care home. Marcy flinched. I almost told Ruth to ease up, then remembered Marcy had not eased up when they printed my name on a memorial box. Marcy said Daniel handled the accounts. Their mortgage had ballooned. His business had failed quietly. Credit cards had been used to keep appearances alive. Dinners, watches, donations, vacations they photographed but could not afford. He told her if my house sold, everyone would be safe. He said I would be happier with care. He said Linda had wanted them to plan because she knew I would refuse help. Mom never said that, Marcy whispered. No, I said. But she did worry about you. She worried about leaving me with you. The words came out harsher than I intended. Marcy bent over the mug as if the steam could hide her face. Ruth slid a tissue across the table. Continue. Marcy admitted she knew about Greenhaven. She admitted she approved the realtor visit. She admitted she let Daniel tell people I was confused because it made questions stop. Then Ruth asked about the donation money. Marcy stared at the table. Marcy, I said, where is the money? Daniel said it was temporary. Every villain in family history has survived on that word. Temporary loan, temporary lie, temporary signature, temporary betrayal. Then one day the temporary thing becomes permanent and the people hurt by it are expected to be mature. How much? I asked. About $19,000. Ruth inhaled through her nose. $19,000. From widows, retirees, church friends, shop customers, and people who had loved Linda enough to trust her daughter's grief. Marcy began crying. I was going to put it back. When the land sold. I stood too fast. The chair scraped the floor. The land was not yours to sell. She looked up, startled by the volume. My life is not a bridge loan, Marcy. She covered her mouth. For a moment, nobody moved. Then I heard Linda's voice in my memory. Tell the truth in front of the people they lied to. I asked Marcy one final question. Did you know Daniel cut the bottom of the donation box? Her confusion was immediate, real. What? Ruth watched her carefully. I opened the laptop and played the kitchen video. Marcy listened to her own voice first, then Daniel's, then the scrape of scissors cutting felt. When Daniel explained how money could disappear without opening the top, Marcy's face drained of color. I didn't know that part, she said. That part, Ruth repeated. Marcy covered her ears when the video reached her saying, I don't want him in the way. I stopped it. She sobbed then, not polite tears, not funeral tears, the kind that make a person ugly and honest. I wanted to hold her. I wanted to push her out of my house. I sat between those two fathers, both of them wounded. Tell me what to do, she said. Ruth answered before I could. Start by giving your father every password, account number, email, message, receipt, and document. Then you write a statement in your own words. Daniel will destroy me. I looked at my daughter. No, I said, Daniel already did. Now you decide whether you help him bury the body. At 11:06 that night, Marcy forwarded us the first batch of emails. At 11:19, Daniel called her 43 times. At 11:37, he sent me a text. You think you won? Check the workshop tomorrow. I did not sleep after that. Smoke has a sound before it has a shape. It cracks, it whispers, it eats. At 3:14 in the morning, my workshop alarm screamed through the house, and I woke already running. The back windows glowed orange. For one stunned second, I stood in the hallway between my dead wife's bedroom and my father's tools, unable to choose which loss to understand first. Then I moved. The workshop door was hot when I reached it. Not warm, hot. I grabbed the extinguisher from the side wall and kicked the bottom panel because the handle burned my palm. Smoke rolled out black and mean. The fire had started near the office corner, where old invoices, varnish rags, and shipping boxes sat too close together. It climbed the wall with greedy hands. I sprayed until the extinguisher coughed empty. By the time the fire department arrived, the worst had been knocked down, but the damage was done. One wall charred, the desk ruined, 2 cabinets warped. My father's plane, the one he used before I had hands big enough to hold it, lay blackened on the floor like a dead bird. A young firefighter asked if I needed to sit. I said no, then sat anyway. Ruth arrived in pajamas under her red coat. Marcy arrived 10 minutes later, barefoot in sneakers, hair wild, face terrified. Daniel arrived last, breathing hard though he lived closer than she did. He stepped toward Marcy. She stepped behind Ruth. That told me plenty. The fire investigator found the broken side window. He found glass outside, not inside. He found a gasoline smell near the office door. Daniel stood with his hands in his pockets, watching me watch him. Tragic, he said softly, maybe old wiring. My wiring doesn't text threats. His eyes flicked toward the investigator. I showed the text. Daniel laughed. That's not a threat, that's a warning. I knew your workshop was unsafe. Ruth said, at 3 in the morning, Daniel. He smiled at her. I worry about family. The investigator bagged a rag from the shrubs. Marcy stared at it as if it might speak. Then I remembered the workshop camera. The office corner camera had probably burned, but Linda had installed a second one under the eave facing the side window after raccoons got into the trash. If it had uploaded before the heat took the power, it might have seen something. Inside the house, with smoke still in my hair, I opened the cloud account. The Eve camera had recorded until 3:07. At 2:58, a figure came through the side gate wearing a hood and gloves. He carried a small red can. His face stayed hidden until he bent to pry the window. The porch light flickered. For half a second, the camera caught his watch. Gold, too large. Marcy made a sound like she had been struck. Daniel said, that proves nothing. Nobody had accused him yet. The investigator looked at him. Daniel's mouth tightened. The video continued. The figure poured liquid through the broken window. He lit something. Then, as he turned away, his glove caught on the latch. He yanked his hand free. Something fell into the grass. The investigator went outside with a flashlight. He returned holding a cufflink in a plastic bag. Marcy whispered, I bought those for him. Daniel looked at her then, not with love, not even anger. With betrayal, as if she had broken a rule by recognizing the truth. The police arrived before sunrise. They did not arrest him that morning. Men like Daniel rarely leave only one kind of evidence, and police prefer piles over pieces, but they took his statement, they took the video, they took the cufflink, they took my phone. As the sun rose, I stood in the doorway of my wounded workshop. Marcy came beside me. I am so sorry, she said. I looked at the blackened wall, at the tools, at the place where Linda had hidden the ledger. Sorry is a match after the fire, I said. She cried quietly. This time I let her. By noon, the town had 2 stories. In Daniel's version, I was a grieving old man who had become obsessed with accusing family. The workshop fire was an accident, maybe caused by my own negligence, and Daniel's cufflink had been planted because I couldn't bear losing control. In the other version, the one Ruth spread with the precision of a surgeon and the mercy of a tax audit, Daniel had tried to steal memorial donations, force me into care, sell my land, and burn the workshop when evidence appeared. Small towns do not wait for court. They hold trials in grocery aisles, church parking lots, and comment sections under posts that begin with praying for everyone involved. By evening, my phone would not stop buzzing. Some messages were kind, some were cowardly. I always knew Daniel was off. We didn't want to get involved. Is Marcy okay? Maybe don't make family matters public. That last one came from a man who had donated $50 at Linda's funeral. I typed a reply, deleted it, and handed the phone to Ruth before I became the kind of old man Daniel described. Marcy stayed at my house because Daniel had emptied their joint account and changed the garage code. She slept in Linda's sewing room, which felt both wrong and fitting. Grief makes strange arrangements. The woman who helped endanger me now sat under shelves of fabric, surrounded by the patient work of the mother she had betrayed. At dinner, she told me about Daniel's anger. He had isolated her slowly, first by mocking friends, then by managing money, then by turning every family concern into proof that only he understood reality. When Linda questioned charges, Daniel called her controlling. When I refused to lend money, he called me selfish. When Marcy cried, he called her disloyal. He made me feel like choosing him was the only way to prove I was grown, she said. I cut my meat into pieces too small because my hands needed a job. You were grown when you chose. I know. That answer mattered, not enough, but it mattered. Ruth arrived with printed bank records from the memorial account. Daniel had transferred money in batches under labels like facility deposit, medical consult, family transition. One transfer went to a luxury hotel 2 towns over, another to a jeweler. Marcy recognized the jeweler. My anniversary bracelet, she said. Ruth looked at her over the paper. Your mother's friends bought you that bracelet. Marcy ran to the bathroom and vomited. I sat at the table alone. Forgiveness is often described by people who haven't been asked to swallow glass. They make it sound clean, almost holy, but what I felt was uglier. I wanted my daughter saved. I wanted her punished. I wanted Linda alive to tell me which desire made me more human. At 9:40, Pastor Glenn called. He said people from the church were upset about the memorial money and wanted clarity. Clarity is coming, I said. We'd prefer to handle this quietly. No, Arthur, scandal helps no one. Scandal already happened. Quiet helped Daniel. The pastor sighed. What are you planning? I looked at Ruth. She nodded once. Linda's memorial dinner is Saturday, I said. Everyone who donated will be there. Daniel wanted a performance. We'll give him one. The line went silent. You don't have to come, I added, but bring a projector if you do. After I hung up, Marcy came back pale and shaking. Are you going to play everything? She asked. No. She looked relieved. I'm going to play enough. That night I sorted evidence into folders. Donations, Greenhaven, Realtor, Ledger, Fire, Camera. Each file felt like a board in a coffin, not for Daniel, for the version of my family I had been trying to keep alive. At midnight, a rock shattered my front window. Wrapped around it was a note. Back off, old man. Ruth picked up the rock with kitchen tongs and placed it in a freezer bag. He's getting sentimental, she said. The church hall smelled like meatballs, coffee, and judgment. Linda's memorial dinner had been planned before any of this, back when people believed grief could be fed with casseroles and folding chairs. A banner hung crooked above the serving table, celebrating Linda Hart. Someone had placed sunflowers in mason jars because Linda loved them, though she would have complained the stems were cut too short. I arrived with Ruth on one side and Marcy on the other. The room quieted in pieces. People looked at Marcy first. Some with pity, some with blame, most with the hungry caution people use around a fresh scandal. Then they looked at me, measuring whether I appeared confused, unstable, dangerous around tools. I wore the gray jacket again. Daniel stood near the coffee urn in a navy suit, surrounded by 3 men from his business club. He smiled when he saw me. It was an astonishing thing, that smile, proof that some men think confidence can outrun evidence. He crossed the room with open arms. "Arthur," he said loudly, "I'm glad you're well enough to come." I let him hug me. His mouth near my ear, he whispered, "Careful." I patted his back for the audience. "You too." Pastor Glenn opened with prayer. He spoke of Linda's kindness, her pies, her stubborn faith. He said family should be a refuge in hardship. Ruth made a small noise that might have been a cough if coughs could carry legal threats. After dinner, Pastor Glenn invited anyone to share memories. A neighbor talked about Linda bringing soup after surgery. My apprentice talked about her teaching him to dance at our anniversary party. Marcy tried to speak, but broke down after 3 words and sat again. Then Daniel stood. Of course he did. He walked to the front with a folded paper and the face of a man accepting an award for suffering. "Linda was like a second mother to me," he began. Ruth whispered, "I will haunt him while alive." Daniel continued, "She worried deeply about Arthur. In her final days, she asked Marcy and me to make hard decisions. Some people have misunderstood our intentions, but everything we did was for family." My pulse slowed. Not sped, slowed. There comes a moment when anger becomes so clean it stops burning. Daniel placed a hand over his heart. The Memorial Fund was created to honor Linda and support Arthur's transition into safer care. It breaks my heart that grief has twisted that kindness into suspicion. People murmured. He looked at me with wet eyes he had summoned from whatever swamp supplied them. "Pops, we forgive you." Marcy stood so abruptly, her chair fell backward. "No," she said. The room turned. Daniel's smile faltered. "Marcy, sit down." She shook her head. "No." Ruth rose next. "Pastor, is the projector ready?" Pastor Glenn looked like a man regretting every theological choice that led him here, but he nodded. Daniel said, "This is inappropriate." I walked to the front, carrying Linda's red ledger. "No," I said, "this is overdue." The first slide was simple, a photo of the donation box beside the bank records. I told the room the fund was not managed by the church, not by me, not by any legitimate memorial account. It was Daniel's personal account. I showed the transfers, the hotel, the jeweler, the cash withdrawals. People began whispering Daniel's name like a diagnosis. He shouted, "Those are taken out of context." Ruth clicked the next file. The kitchen camera video filled the wall. Daniel appeared on screen, cutting the bottom from the donation box. His own voice echoed through the church hall. "People will believe anything about old people if you say it with a sad face." No one whispered after that. No one had to. Daniel moved before anyone else did. He lunged toward the laptop, but Ruth had placed it behind Pastor Glenn, who, for all his preference for quiet scandal, was still a man large enough to block a doorway. Daniel stopped short, hands raised, as if he had merely been reaching for clarification. "That's edited," he said. His voice cracked on the second word. Ruth clicked again. The workshop video played next. Daniel and Marcy stood in the dark among my tools. His voice filled the hall. "After Greenhaven, we list it as distressed. The old man won't last 2 winters in there." A woman gasped. Not loudly, worse. Softly, like she had finally understood she had given money to cruelty. Marcy walked to the front. Her hands shook, but her voice held. "I helped him," she said. "I let him lie. I let people believe my father was confused because I was scared and selfish, and because Daniel told me this was the only way to fix our debt." Daniel laughed, a broken, ugly sound. "She's unstable, look at her." Marcy turned toward him. "No, I'm ashamed. There's a difference." That line changed the room. Shame, when spoken honestly, has weight. People can feel it. It doesn't ask to be rescued. It stands there bleeding. I watched my daughter tell the church about Greenhaven, the realtor, the lies. She did not soften her part. Ruth had made sure of that. She said she knew enough to stop it and didn't. She said the memorial money had been misused. She said she would cooperate with police, repay what she could, and sign a sworn statement. Then she looked at me. I don't deserve Dad's forgiveness. I'm not asking for it tonight. That mattered too. Daniel pointed at her. You think they'll love you after this? You think he will? You're nothing without me. The room heard him then, not as a husband, as a jailer. Pastor Glenn stepped forward. Daniel, you should leave. Daniel's head snapped toward him. You knew Arthur was declining. You said families should make decisions together. I said he needed support, the pastor replied, not theft. A retired police officer named Bill, who had donated $200 from his pension, stood near the exit. I'll walk him out. Daniel looked around for allies and found only witnesses. Before he left, he leaned toward me. You think this saves your house? Lawsuits will eat you alive. I looked at the wall where Linda's face still appeared in the slideshow, smiling above a table of sunflowers. No, I said, Linda saved the house. I just pressed play. The police met Daniel in the parking lot. This time they had enough to arrest him, not for everything, not yet, but for suspected fraud tied to the memorial account and for intimidation after the rock through my window. The arson would take longer. Crimes that burn things leave ash, but ash still speaks if patient people listen. Inside the hall, people approached me in a line that felt more painful than comforting. They apologized. They said they should have asked questions. They said Daniel had seemed so concerned. They said Marcy looked pressured. They said Linda would be proud. That last one nearly undid me. I went outside for air. Marcy followed, but stayed 10 feet away. Dad, she said, I know tonight doesn't fix it. No. Can I still help clean up the workshop? I looked at her. The parking lot lights made her look older, not mature, just worn. Tomorrow, I said, 8 o'clock. Her face crumpled with relief she did not deserve, and I could not help giving. Ruth joined me after Marcy went back inside. That was merciful, she said. Was it? For you, maybe. We stood together under the church awning while rain began again. Ruth handed me Linda's red ledger. She wanted truth, she said. I held the book carefully. She got it. Ruth looked toward the police lights fading down the road. No, Arthur, she started it, now you finish. Marcy arrived at 7:42 the next morning with work gloves, coffee, and a face that had forgotten how to ask for easy things. I was already in the workshop, sorting what survived from what had become memory. The fire had left the place smelling like wet ash and chemicals. Every step made grit crunch under our shoes. Sunlight came through the broken side window and landed on blackened boards where Linda's hidden safe had been. Marcy stood in the doorway. Where do I start? I pointed to a pile of scorched lumber. There. For 3 hours we worked without talking. She carried ruined boards to the dumpster. I wrapped damaged tools in old towels. Ruth labeled boxes with evidence tape whenever something might matter. An insurance adjuster came and went. A detective took more photos. The world continued being practical around the wreckage of my life. At noon, Marcy found my father's plane beneath the bench. Its handle was burned, but the blade remained. She brought it to me with both hands. I remember you teaching me how to use this, she said. You were 9. I cut my thumb. You screamed like you lost the whole arm. She laughed once, then cried. I took the plane and set it aside for repair. Not everything burned has to be thrown away. Not everything can be restored either. Knowing the difference is where pain lives. That afternoon, we went to Ruth's dining room to write Marcy's statement. Ruth insisted on doing it there because my house still smelled like smoke, and because, she said, confessions require decent lighting. Marcy wrote by hand first. Ruth made her be specific: dates, amounts, names, what she knew when she knew it, what Daniel said, what she signed, what she ignored. Several times Marcy tried to write, I was manipulated. Where the sentence needed, I agreed. Ruth circled it each time. Manipulation explains, Ruth said. It does not erase. Marcy nodded and corrected it. I sat by the window with tea, listening to my daughter dismantle her own excuses. It was not satisfying. I had imagined justice as a clean blade. Instead, it was more like surgery without anesthesia. Necessary, bloody, and full of things nobody wanted to see. Near the end, Marcy wrote about Linda. Mom asked me once whether debt had made me cruel. I told her she was being dramatic. I understand now that she was giving me a chance to answer honestly before she died. Marcy stopped there and sobbed. Ruth did not hand her a tissue right away. Sometimes people need to feel the consequence without someone rushing to make it smaller. When the statement was done, Marcy signed it in front of a notary Ruth knew from Bridge Club. Then she gave me a folder. What is this? Passwords, accounts, messages, everything I have. I opened it. On top was a printed email from Daniel to someone named Kessler Development. Subject, Hart Property Fast Close. The email mentioned a deposit. He accepted money, I asked. Marcy nodded. 10,000, non-refundable unless he couldn't deliver clean title. Ruth's eyes brightened in a way that would have frightened a kinder enemy. Well, she said, that explains the fire. I looked at the email again. Daniel had promised vacancy, distressed condition, and family consent. The buyer wanted the workshop removed. The fire would have solved two problems at once: destroy evidence and reduce the property to land value. That evening, my lawyer called. Arthur, he said, do you want the good news or the satisfying news? At my age, I take whatever is available. The good news is Daniel's petition won't survive contact with evidence. And the satisfying, Kessler Development just received a preservation notice. If they touched this knowingly, they will regret learning your wife's name. I looked at Linda's empty chair. She always did make an impression, I said. The man from Kessler Development arrived in a silver truck 2 days later. He parked at the curb and stood by my front fence wearing expensive boots that had never met mud honestly. He was mid-50s, smooth-faced, with the calm expression of a person who believes consequences are for people with less money. I met him at the gate. Mr. Hart, he said, offering a card. Graham Kessler, I think there's been a misunderstanding. That's popular lately. He lowered the card. I negotiated with your son-in-law in good faith. My son-in-law did not own my land. No, but he represented family consensus. Family consensus doesn't sign deeds. Kessler smiled as if I were a charming obstacle. Of course, still, deposits were paid, plans were begun, my company has costs. So did my wife. That wiped some polish off him. Ruth appeared on the porch with a folder. She had dressed for the occasion in her red coat, though the day was warm. Marcy stood behind her, arms crossed, still not strong enough to look dangerous, but no longer small enough to ignore. Kessler glanced at them. Perhaps we should talk privately. No, I said. His jaw tightened. He explained that Daniel had claimed I was moving permanently to Greenhaven. He said Daniel had documents. He said the property was ideal for 6 townhomes and that the old workshop, while sentimental, was not structurally significant. I looked past him at the building my father had raised with 2 cousins and a borrowed cement mixer. Structurally significant. People like Kessler used language the way Daniel used concern, to make theft sound professional. Ruth handed him a copy of Daniel's email and a preservation notice. Kessler read quickly. You can't imply we were involved in any fire. I didn't imply, Ruth said. I preserved. He looked at me. This could become expensive. Not as expensive as underestimating a dead woman's paperwork. For the first time, Kessler looked genuinely unsure. Marcy stepped off the porch. Her voice shook, but she spoke. Daniel told me you wanted the workshop gone before inspection. Kessler turned. I never said that. You said removal would simplify environmental review. That is not the same thing. You also told Daniel the old man would be easier to manage once placed. Kessler's face hardened. Ruth smiled. Please continue, Marcy. I enjoy live discovery. Kessler left without shaking hands. That night, his attorney emailed mine. The tone had changed from warning to cooperation. Kessler wanted to withdraw any claim, provide communications, and confirm Daniel had no authority. He also wanted assurance we would not name his company publicly. Ruth advised me to be practical. Take the documents, she said. Decide about Mercy later. You're becoming soft. I said later. The documents arrived the next day. They included messages where Daniel described me as nearly incapacitated, Linda as emotionally attached but gone, and Marcy as on board once her father is handled. Handled. I stared at that word longer than I should have. Marcy read it over my shoulder and went pale. He talked about me like property too. I wanted to say something gentle. Instead, I said the truth. Daniel didn't make you betray me, but he was always going to betray you. She nodded. That night she packed her remaining clothes from Daniel's house with a police officer present. She returned with 2 suitcases, a box of Linda's old recipes, and a bruise on her wrist she tried to hide. I saw it. So did Ruth. Did he do that? I asked. Marcy's eyes filled. He grabbed me when I took Mom's quilts. The next morning, Daniel's bail conditions changed. By evening, he was ordered to have no contact. The house was quieter after that, but not peaceful. Peace does not rush into a room just because danger leaves. Sometimes it waits outside, making sure the liars are really gone. Daniel's mother called on a Sunday, which felt strategic. Her name was Vivian, and she had never liked Linda because Linda had once told her, calmly and in front of a buffet table, that enabling was not the same as loving. Vivian had worn pearls to every family event and disappointment like perfume. Arthur, she said, this has gone far enough. I closed my eyes. Behind me, Marcy was sanding soot from a salvageable shelf in the workshop. Ruth was arguing with the insurance company on speaker in the kitchen. My life had become a courthouse with casseroles. Hello, Vivian. My son is not a monster. No, monsters have the decency to be fictional. She exhaled sharply. Daniel made mistakes under pressure. Marcy pushed him. You know how emotional she is. There it was, the family tree bearing fruit. Vivian, your son tried to put me in a care home and steal donations collected at my wife's funeral. Allegedly. I have video. Video can be misunderstood. He cut the donation box open. Arthur, grief makes people dramatic. I laughed, not because it was funny, because Daniel had learned the language somewhere, and now I was hearing the original dialect. Vivian lowered her voice. If you continue, Daniel's life is ruined. I looked through the window at Marcy, sanding in slow, determined strokes. Her life had cracked open too, but no one from Daniel's side had called to ask if she was safe. Linda's life ended, I said. Mine was targeted. Marcy's was controlled. Your son's reputation is not the emergency. Vivian went cold. You always thought you were better than us. No, Linda did. I hung up before she could answer. The call unsettled me more than I expected. Not because Vivian mattered, but because I recognized in her the same architecture Daniel used. Deny, minimize, reverse blame, ask for mercy before accountability. Families teach patterns in whispers long before the world hears them shouted. That afternoon, I found Marcy sitting on the workshop floor, holding Linda's quilt. Vivian called me too, she said. What did she say? That I destroyed her son. I sat beside her, carefully because old knees are honest. What did you say? Nothing. Sometimes nothing is a complete sentence. She leaned her head back against a cabinet. I keep thinking about when Mom asked if debt made me cruel. I waited. I laughed at her. I told Daniel, and he laughed too. We joked she was becoming suspicious in her old age. Marcy pressed the quilt to her chest. She was dying, and I made her feel crazy. I did not comfort her. That may sound cruel, but I had learned something from Ruth. Rushing to relieve guilt can become another form of lying. Marcy needed to sit in the room she built. After a long silence, she said, "Do you hate me?" "No." She cried. "I don't know what I feel," I added. She cried harder, but she nodded. That evening, Detective Harris came by with updates. The arson case was strengthening. The cufflink had Daniel's partial print inside the clasp. Gasoline residue on the rag matched a confound in his garage. His phone had pinged near my property at 2:55 a.m. Though he claimed he had been asleep. "He's saying you framed him," Harris said. "With his phone, his cufflink, his gasoline, and his watch." The detective almost smiled. "I've heard worse." Then he asked about Linda's files. "Mrs. Hart documented a lot. She liked tidy drawers. She may be the strongest witness in this case." After he left, I went to Linda's grave alone. I told her Vivian called. I told her Marcy was trying. I told her the workshop smelled less like smoke now. Then I said the thing I had avoided. "I hate that you knew and didn't tell me." The cemetery did not answer. Good. I wasn't ready for forgiveness from the dead either. The plea offer arrived in language so clean it felt indecent. Daniel would admit to fraud related to the memorial fund, attempted coercion regarding my placement, harassment, and obstruction. The arson charge remained under negotiation because his attorney claimed the fire had been reckless intimidation rather than intent to destroy evidence or property. Ruth read that phrase out loud 3 times. "Reckless intimidation," she said. "That is what cowards call arson when wearing a tie." My lawyer explained the risks. Trials were long, juries were unpredictable. Daniel's defense would attack my memory, Marcy's credibility, Linda's illness, the authenticity of videos, the chain of custody, the town gossip, the weather if allowed. A plea could secure restitution, protective orders, and prison time without putting us through months of public bleeding. "What does Marcy think?" I asked. My lawyer hesitated. "She wants you to decide." That answer made me angry at first. Then I understood it was not avoidance. It was respect she should have practiced earlier. I spent that night in the kitchen with Linda's red ledger. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak old homes make when they are deciding whether to keep secrets. I read every page again, not for evidence, for my wife. Her notes were precise, but between them lived fear. I saw it now, not panic. Linda did not panic, but careful fear. The kind that makes a woman record conversations in her own kitchen while pretending to enjoy soup. The kind that makes her hide flash drives where her husband won't find them until she is gone. At 1:12 a.m., I found an entry I had missed. "If Arthur learns all of it, he will blame himself for not seeing. He must not. Love is not blindness. Deceit is camouflage." I closed the ledger and wept. The next morning, I called Marcy into the kitchen. "Tell me what you want," I said. She looked terrified. "I want him to admit what he did. And if he admits, only enough. I want him away from us." "Arthur." She swallowed. "If I'm still allowed to say that." I looked at her for a long time. "You can say it. You have to earn what it means." She nodded. At the courthouse, Daniel appeared thinner and angrier. Vivian sat behind him in pearls, staring at me like I had personally invented consequences. Marcy sat beside Ruth. She did not look at Daniel. The judge reviewed the terms. Daniel would plead guilty to felony fraud, attempted exploitation of a vulnerable adult, witness intimidation, and criminal mischief tied to the workshop fire, with restitution and a sentence recommendation that included prison. "Not enough," said the angry part of me. "Enough to stop him," said Linda's handwriting in my mind. The judge asked if I wished to speak. I stood with a folded page. "Daniel called me Pops when people were listening," I said. "He called me old man when he wanted me afraid. He tried to turn grief into evidence against me. He stole from people who loved my wife. He tried to place me somewhere I did not belong so he could sell what he did not own." Daniel stared at the table. But the deepest harm was not property. It was language. He used words like care, concern, safety, and family until they sounded dirty. My wife spent her last months collecting truth because he made honesty unsafe. My voice shook then. I let it. I accept this plea because I want him stopped more than I want him performed in another room full of witnesses. I want restitution for the people he stole from. I want the record to say I was not confused. I was betrayed. The courtroom was silent. The judge nodded. Daniel entered his plea. "Guilty sounds smaller than you expect. 1 word, 2 syllables. not nearly heavy enough for the wreckage behind it. But it held. Restitution arrived in pieces. A check from Daniel's frozen account. A cashier's check from Vivian, delivered through her attorney with no note. A partial insurance payment. A settlement from Kessler Development that everyone called confidential, though Ruth said confidentiality was just shame with better stationery. We repaid every donor first. Ruth insisted each person receive a letter, a check, and the truth in plain language, not dramatic, not softened. Linda Hart's Memorial Fund was misused by Daniel Price. Your donation is returned. Arthur Hart thanks you for honoring Linda. Legal accountability is underway. Some people cashed the checks. Some returned them, with notes asking me to use the money for the workshop. One envelope contained $20 and a card from the young woman who had been saving for a laptop. She wrote, "Mrs. Hart helped me with college essays. Please buy flowers for her." I did. Yellow roses, not sunflowers. Linda had loved sunflowers in kitchens and roses in dirt. The workshop became a community project without anyone officially deciding it. Men from the machine shop came on Saturdays. My apprentice brought his sons. Pastor Glenn showed up with a toolbox so clean Ruth asked if it was decorative. Even neighbors who had believed Daniel brought paint, lumber, sandwiches, and apologies disguised as practical help. Marcy worked harder than anyone. She stripped burned boards, sanded shelves, cataloged tools, answered donor calls, met with investigators, went to counseling twice a week, and came home hollow-eyed but steadier. One afternoon, I found her repainting the workshop office wall. Linda had chosen the old color, a stubborn green neither of us liked, but both tolerated because she claimed it made invoices less depressing. Marcy had matched it exactly. "You could have picked something nicer," I said. She kept rolling paint. "I know." That was the first moment I believed she understood repair. Not improvement, not performance, repair. Daniel was sentenced in late autumn. 3 years with eligibility and conditions I did not care to memorize. Restitution, no contact, probation after release, mandatory counseling. Vivian sobbed like the victim's mother in a play where the script had been eaten by wolves. Daniel turned once before they led him away. He looked at Marcy. She looked back. He mouthed something, maybe sorry, maybe coward, maybe wait. She did not move. After court, reporters from a local paper tried to ask questions because fraud at a funeral has a headline quality people enjoy until it happens near them. Ruth handled them. "Mrs. Hart left excellent records," she said. "Let that be the quote." The story ran anyway. Memorial Fund fraud exposed by late wife's CAMERAS. They got Linda's age wrong and described me as elderly, which made Ruth threaten a correction on both counts. Life did not become good immediately. That is a lie stories tell when they are tired. There were mornings I woke angry enough to taste metal. There were afternoons I reached for the phone to call Linda and remembered all over again. There were dinners where Marcy and I sat across from each other with too many ghosts in the room. But there were changes. Marcy started saying I chose instead of Daniel made me. I started saying come by Sunday instead of waiting to see if she would ask. Ruth pretended not to notice and noticed everything. On the first cold night of November, the workshop heat clicked on. The new wall held. The old tools hung clean. Linda's sign was back above the bench. Measure twice, cut once. Under it, Marcy had added a small brass plaque. Tell the truth before it burns. I stared at it for a long time. Then I nodded. Linda would have hated the drama of it. She would also have left it there. The idea for recording came from a boy named Tyler. He was my apprentice's youngest, 12 years old, all elbows and questions. He had helped sweep ash from the workshop and carried tools with the solemnity of a pallbearer. One Saturday, he found the old microphone Linda had bought me after my retirement party. "You should tell people what happened," he said. "I already did." "No, like tell it. My mom listens to stories while she cooks. People need to know when family acts fake." Ruth overheard and said, "The child has identified a market." I dismissed it for a week. Then I found myself alone in the workshop on a rainy night, microphone on the bench, Linda's ledger beside it. The new camera blinked from the corner, not hidden anymore, visible. A small black eye that promised memory. I plugged the microphone into my laptop. My voice sounded strange at first, older than I felt, rough at the edges. I told the story from the funeral, then stopped after 3 minutes because I sounded like a man reading a police report. Linda hated stiff storytelling. She used to stop me at dinner and say, "Arthur, include the part where you were ridiculous." So I began again. I told the part where Daniel called me Pops, an old man, in the same week. I told the part where Ruth threatened a pastor with projector equipment. I told the part where Marcy discovered her bracelet had been bought with memorial money. I told the part where I wanted to forgive her and punish her at the same time, and how both feelings sat at my table like relatives who refused to leave. When I finished the first recording, I sent it to Ruth. She replied, "Too long, too honest, keep both." Marcy listened 2 days later. She cried, which I expected. Then she said something I did not. "You made me sound human." "You aren't. I didn't act like it." "No. Thank you for not making that the whole of me." I thought about that for a while. The world likes villains clean. It likes victims clean too. But families are not clean. They are old houses full of rooms people refuse to enter. Daniel was a villain because he kept choosing harm and calling it care. Marcy was not innocent. She had to live with that. But she had opened the door before it locked forever. I recorded 20 chapters over the winter. Not because I wanted fame. Not because I wanted strangers picking over my pain like church hall leftovers. I recorded because Daniel's greatest weapon had been controlling the story before anyone else heard it. He knew people believed the first confident voice in a room. So I became the first voice in mine. We called the little channel Storytime with Pops because Tyler said old men on microphones need names people remember. Ruth said it sounded sentimental. Marcy said that might be the point. The first upload got 12 views, 4 were Ruth. The second got 47. Then one night, a comment appeared from someone in Ohio. "My brother did this to our mom. I thought I was crazy. Thank you." I read it 3 times. Then I showed Linda's picture. "Well," I said to her, "apparently we're useful." By spring, the workshop had become half woodshop, half recording room. Foam panels stood between clamps. The microphone sat near the old plane. Linda's red ledger stayed locked away, but not hidden. Hiding had done its job. Now truth could sit in the light. Marcy began helping edit audio. The first time she cut out one of my long pauses, I said, "Leave that. Dead air loses listeners. Some silence deserves to be heard." She put it back. That became our rhythm. She made the story tighter. I made sure it stayed true. We were not healed, but we were working with the same material again. Daniel's letter arrived 9 months after sentencing. The envelope had a prison return address and my name written in block letters. For a moment, I considered throwing it into the wood stove unopened. Ruth, who happened to be visiting, said, "Burning evidence is usually his hobby." So I opened it. Arthur, he did not write Pops. That alone felt like progress or strategy. The letter was 4 pages long. It began with childhood wounds I had not caused, detoured through business pressure, blamed Vivian twice, mentioned Marcy's emotional volatility, and apologized in sentences that kept leaving side doors unlocked. I regret that things went as far as they did. Mistakes were made during an impossible time. I hope one day you can see I was trying to protect the family from financial collapse. Ruth read over my shoulder and made a sound of pure disgust. "Passive voice should add years to a sentence," she said. At the end, Daniel asked me to support early release when the time came. He said prison had changed him. He said he wanted to make amends. He said he missed his wife. Marcy was in the workshop when I showed her. She read it standing up. Her face did not change until the last line. Then she handed it back. "He misses control," she said. I waited. A year ago, I would have cried over that letter. And now I want a lawyer to keep it. Ruth smiled like a teacher watching a student finally underline the right sentence. We gave the letter to the prosecutor. That evening, Marcy and I recorded an episode about apologies, not Daniel's specifically. We changed names, details, enough to protect the legal edges. But we talked about apology without ownership, remorse that asks for comfort, and the way abusers use regret as a fishing line. It became our most listened-to story. Comments poured in. My mother says, "I'm sorry you felt that way." My ex apologized only when he needed rent. My sister stole from Dad, then cried because we stopped trusting her. I did not enjoy the suffering, but I recognized the relief beneath it. People were hearing patterns named aloud. That can be the first crack in a locked room. The channel grew. Storytime with Pops became a place where I told dark stories about families that turned love into leverage, spouses who weaponized trust, siblings who treated inheritance like permission to become cruel. I always ended with justice when I could, and truth when justice was late. Sometimes people asked if my stories were real. I answered the same way each time. They are honest. Linda's roses bloomed heavy that summer. The yellow ones climbed the fence near the rebuilt workshop window. I installed a bench there because my knees preferred dignity over denial. Marcy came most Sundays. Sometimes we talked about Daniel. More often we talked about paint colors, grocery prices, editing mistakes, and whether Ruth should be allowed to read mean comments unsupervised. One Sunday, Marcy brought a box. Inside was the anniversary bracelet. "I don't want it," she said. I understood before she explained. Memorial money had bought it. Even if restitution had repaid the account, the object still carried the wrong weight. "What do you want to do with it?" "Sell it, donate the money to Greenhaven, for residents without visitors." I looked at her. She did not shrink from it. "Your mother would like that," I said. Marcy cried, but quietly. Some tears asked for rescue, these did not. These watered something. On the first anniversary of Linda's funeral, we held no ceremony. Ceremonies had been contaminated for a while. Not forever, maybe, but for that year, the thought of folding chairs and donation boxes made my skin tighten. Instead, Marcy, Ruth, Tyler, my apprentice, and a few friends came to the house. We ate Linda's chicken stew from her recipe card, though Ruth claimed I oversalted it and then had 2 bowls. After dinner, we walked to the workshop. The rebuilt room glowed warm against the dark. Tools hung in their places. The office wall wore its stubborn green. The brass plaque under Linda's sign caught the light. "Tell the truth before it burns." Marcy had made a small shelf beneath it for Linda's photo, not the funeral photo. The anniversary one, where she laughed at my champagne-stained tie. Beside it sat my father's restored plane and the microphone that had carried our story farther than I ever expected. Ruth raised a mug. "To Linda, who trusted evidence because people are disappointing." "To Linda," we said. Later, when everyone else had gone, Marcy stayed to help wash dishes. The kitchen camera blinked above the pantry. It was newer now, clearer, connected to better storage. I had considered taking it down once the case ended. I didn't. Not because I wanted to live suspicious, because memory matters. Because truth sometimes needs a witness that doesn't get tired, manipulated, or embarrassed. Marcy noticed me looking at it. "Does it bother you?" I asked. She dried a plate slowly. "It reminds me of Daniel, of Mom, of what she had to do because I wouldn't listen." I nodded. She set the plate down. "Dad, do you think we'll ever be okay?" I leaned against the counter. At 25, I would have answered too quickly. At 40, I would have pretended wisdom. At 72, I had earned the right to be honest. "I think okay is not one thing," I said. "Some days we'll have it, some days we won't. The work is not lying about which day it is." She smiled through tears. "That sounds like something Mom would say. Your mother would say it better, and with pie." We laughed. That laugh did not erase anything. It did not resurrect Linda or unburn the wall or turn Daniel into a man who had loved correctly. It did not return the funeral to us. But it entered the room anyway, uninvited and welcome. Before Marcy left, she paused at the door. "Sunday?" she asked. "Sunday." After her car disappeared down the road, I went to the workshop and turned on the microphone. The camera light glowed in the corner. I began the next story the way I had learned to begin all true dark stories, not with the worst thing, but with the lie that made the worst thing possible. My daughter said she was protecting me, I said into the quiet. My son-in-law said he was saving the family. My town said maybe I was confused, but my wife left a camera running, and sometimes justice starts with a little green light nobody thinks to fear. I stopped recording and listened to the silence afterward. It was not empty anymore. The house still missed Linda. So did I. Grief had not left. It had simply stopped blocking every doorway. Marcy was not forgiven in one dramatic scene. She was forgiven, or not, in cups of tea, repainted walls, returned money, and Sundays she kept showing up. Daniel would get out someday. I knew that. Men like him often confuse survival with victory. He might write more letters. He might tell new people old lies. He might polish his voice until someone believed him again. But not here. Here the workshop stood. The house stood. Linda's ledger rested in the safe. Ruth remained terrifying. Marcy was learning to tell the truth before fear edited it. And I had a microphone, a story, and a camera still watching from the wall. Some families heal by forgetting. Ours survived because we finally refused to.